We're talking about a atmosphere where a woman would conduct full-on sexual relationships with the young boys and young teenagers.
12 years old, you're an adult, and then you could have sex with adults.
The Children of God was formed in the freewheeling 1960s by an evangelist named David Berg. He started out of a storefront church in Huntington Beach, California. His formula was simple. People could gain salvation through sex.
Beautiful men and women, beautiful youth, even beautiful sex.
The group fit in with the hippie youth culture of the time, using comic books and music to attract people. From the outside, it looked like a very happy group. But the outside world didn't know that the singing was allegedly a soundtrack for sex. Women were even encouraged to entice men, total strangers, into the group by offering them sex. This practice had a name: flirty fishing. Ricky Rodriguez was born through flirty fishing. His mother, Karen Zerby, was David Berg's wife, but his father was a man she had sex with to get him into the religion. David Berg adopted Ricky. He renamed him David Dito and groomed him to take over. But critics claim Ricky was also David Berg's guinea pig.
He began to focus on him not just as a potential heir, but as a model for how to raise children.
From an early age, Ricky was exposed to sexual activity.
It was no longer wrong for an adult woman to have sex with a young boy. It was commonplace.
He was also forced into sexual contact with a series of so-called nannies. David Berg's most undeniably sinister work was a book called The Story of David Dito. It was Ricky's story, and it had pictures of him as a boy, even as an infant, having sexual contact with a young woman.
There's images of 2-year-old Ricky in a bathtub with a nude woman and sort of playing with her and whatnot. And then there's descriptions of sexual acts.
Parents in the sect were encouraged to use Ricky's story as a guide for their own children.
There was a couple of occasions where adult women suggested that they were going to make themselves available for sexual activities with me. And in both cases, I just told them that this is really not something that I'm interested in.
Well, there was fondling and groping by adults. You let them touch your breasts or whatever. And it was very odd because you go to the table and there'd be all the women and stuff, and all you would see is boobs, boobs, boobs all around the table,
The Children of God reached its peak in the 1970s. The first celebrity they reeled in was Jeremy Spencer, original guitarist for the band Fleetwood Mac. He abandoned the group in 1971 before a gig at the Whiskey on the Sunset Strip. Actress Rose McGowan spent part of her childhood in The Children of God. She has said it was an idyllic time and that her parents protected her from abuse. She would grow up to share a home in the hills above the Sunset Strip with Marilyn Manson. And the actor River Phoenix was in the sect as a child. He once said in an interview that he had lost his virginity at the age of 4. Later, he said he was only kidding. All too soon, he died of a drug overdose on the Sunset Strip. By the 1980s, word of sex abuse within the Children of God had leaked out. Berg changed the name of his group to The Family and called it an international Christian organization. With his adopted son and inner circle, he stayed on the move. By the mid-1980s, Berg's health was failing, and his wife, Karen Zerby, began to take charge. In 1986, the leadership officially banned sex between adults and children. The following year, it banned flirty fishing and removed sex references from the story of David Dito.
Since then, the family has essentially used that to say, oh, we don't have anything in our writings that supports child abuse. Well, if you don't, it's because you cut it out and burned it.
David Berg died in 1994. Ricky's mother carried on as the leader. She always assumed that Ricky, David Dito, would take over after she died and lead a new generation of followers. But as soon as he became an adult, he left. He got married and tried to live a normal life in Tucson, Arizona.
Because he got stuck with wanting to move on with his life and his wife and start a family and get away from everything. But yet at the same time, he felt a sense of responsibility.
But Ricky remained tortured by his past. His friend Daniel Roselle tried to convince him there was a way to get justice. Daniel was heading to law school. The main reason was to try to hold the sect responsible for past abuses.
I had a 3-hour conversation with them in person, and I laid out what they could do. We go after the people and try to get some reconciliation or try to get some acknowledgement or try to get the people and get some prosecutions. We just investigate it. We either do it all the way to the very top, to the leaders themselves.
Daniel Roselle thought he had convinced his friend until he got the news.
But I can tell you, you go through somebody's skull, and gonna expand.
By January 2005, the past of Ricky Rodriguez had destroyed his future. He was separated from his wife, and he was haunted by communications with other people his age, men and women who had grown up in the group and whose lives they claim were ruined because of it.
And even though I talked many times to him about how it wasn't his fault and nothing to do with him, you know, you were a victim as well. You know, this isn't your burden to carry. You know, he just really felt that very strongly. He's like, but people are counting on me. And, you know, and it was hard to tell him because I knew they were.
On January 9th, Ricky set up a home video camera in his kitchen. He sat at the table with a gun, ammunition, and a knife.
This is my weapon of choice.
Ricky intended to do away with David Dito for good. After he made this tape, he met a former nanny, Angela Smith. She was 51. She had been secretary to David Berg and Karen Zerby. She was one of the women featured in the story of David Dito. Ricky claimed she had had sexual contact with him when he was a child. Ricky Rodriguez stabbed her 3 times and slashed her throat. Then he got into his Chevy and started to drive. He drove for hours, speaking to his wife on the cell phone. He told her that Angela Smith never realized she had done anything wrong, not even at the end. Ricky said he really wanted to kill his mother. He drove 200 miles to the small desert town of Blythe, California. He wound up at the Palo Verde Irrigation District. It seems he had just ran out of road. He stopped the car, took out a gun, and fired.
It's an awesome responsibility and a horribly awesome responsibility for any person, for any young man to have to bear. It's a horrible thing.
Now, the sect as it exists today, renamed the family, says it has apologized for any past misdeeds, says inappropriate behavior was not widespread and non-existent since 1986. Tim?
All right, Arthel, thank you. That was a disturbing story, but I think important for people to be aware of.
Indeed.
Okay. And we'll be back with more on A Current Affair in a moment.